Hey, so I just finished reading Freedom Evolves by Daniel Dennett. This is the second book from Dennett that I have read. If you recall correctly, the first book from Dennett that I read was Consciousness Explained. Now, I'm going to talk about both of these books because there's a bit of an interplay, and it's a very, very unique, strange interplay here. So, uh, okay, first off, Consciousness Explained was 1991. Freedom Evolves is 2003. So there's a 12-year gap there. And according to this book, Dennett did not change his opinion from Consciousness Explained. So, let's talk about what this book is. So, Freedom Evolves is essentially a series of arguments, not just one argument, it's several arguments for the existence of free will within a neo Darwinian context. And that is very unique because most neo Darwinians are determinists. They believe in the clockwork universe. They, uh, they believe that everything is either determined or completely random, that there is nothing in between. And they believe that the randomness is only in the realm of the quantum. Um, so Dennett in this book actually does a great job of steel manning. He steel mans the determinist position. He essentially argues that determinism is not incompatible with uh, evitability, which is unpredictability. It's just because something is unpredictable does not mean, or just because something is unpredictable does not mean it has not been determined. Um, and that is how I would put it. I would rather say predictability as opposed to evitability, because that's more accurate and that's more clear, in my opinion, anyway. Um, so the interesting thing here is that Dennett is a compatibilist. Okay, so Dennett is a compatibilist. He believes that there is some determined behavior, and he believes some people are more determined than others. And one of the examples he gives is of pedophiles. Uh, I might get in trouble for mentioning that word on YouTube, but pedophiles, if you convict pedophiles and you offer them freedom if they agree to be castrated, of those who agree to be castrated, about 50% of them would have reoffended. Now, what that means is that some people, about 50% of those people, have the free will to deny their own impulses. They have the capacity to deny their own impulses and not reoffend. And the other 50% do not have that ability. So some people are determined, some people are not determined. And we don't have a way of telling who is who. Okay, now the interesting thing that I really wanted to talk about is that, okay, 1991, Consciousness Explained comes out. It is a book that essentially denies consciousness. Consciousness does not exist. It is an illusion. And Dennett, uh, Dennett is kind of fucked up when he does this, because he says that it's all empirical. But if you read the book, it's all rational. It's not empirical. There's like no empiricism. It's all thought experiments. It's all pure rationalism. Kant critiqued pure rationalism. He wrote a huge book that is very famous. It's called The Critique of Pure Reason. Um, so, the issue that I have is how, if consciousness is an illusion, you do not have the ability to consciously decide, how can you justify having free will? You need the ability to consciously decide. You need consciousness in order to have free will. And that's the one big issue I have with this book, because he never addresses that. He never actually addresses that. He makes several good arguments for free will, but he never addresses his own contradictions, which is important. If I said, you know, if I said the president is not the true sovereign of the United States, and then I said a week later or years later that the president has all the abilities that the true sovereign has, that would be a contradiction. And I would need to explain how that can be the case. He doesn't do that. You need consciousness in order to have free will, as far as I am concerned anyway. And technically, all of his arguments in here do involve consciousness. Although he never addresses that. He pretends as if the consciousness is not necessary. The consciousness that is implied is never actually necessary. So, I would say this is a good book, but you gotta think about it. You gotta be critical when you read it. And that just goes for anything that you read. Anything that you read, you should be critical about. You need to think about. You don't just blindly absorb whatever you read. That's about all I wanted to say. Thank you for watching. Peace.